Hello, 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 everyone. Huh. Welcome to Satsang. I'm a little out of breath. I've been restoring a house, basically. Well, I'm not talking about the nature of reality. I'm restoring the house. I'm doing remodeling. So, welcome everyone to Satsang. As people are beginning to join, let me bring it up on the phone so I can see all of the questions as they begin to come in. No, that's notifications, inbox, my channel. It's so good to be here, actually. So wonderful to be here. There we go. So, as always, if you will kindly leave your name and where you're watching from. Just tell me if I can hear. Namaste, GP from Eva. Welcome to everybody. She's from Poland. Great. So once I see all the messages coming in, then I know. Can you all hear me? Okay, I'm assuming so. It's the same setup I've been using now for a while, except I have the microphone above me this time instead of in front of me, because I keep bumping into it while I'm gesturing. And yeah, there's a bunch of stuff around me. We're converting my studio to my tongue drum over there. Hi from Sweden, from Emiliano. Daryl says hello from Washington, D.C. Hello, Daryl. We really need to have way more people in Washington, D.C. participating in satsang. A very asleep crowd out there. What I wanted to talk about as people are joining, before I get into the question. Hi, Johanna from Mexico. Hi, so good to have you. Alan from the UK. What I wanted to talk about is, the approach that I take in talking about non-duality is called the direct approach, the direct path. And the reason it's called the direct path, it's in contradistinction to what is called the progressive path. Now, the progressive path is the way that most people practice spirituality. Buddha referred to it at the time. It was called Hinayana, which means the lesser vehicle, and the direct or sudden path, the Mahayana, or great vehicle. Now, they're not mutually exclusive by any stretch of the imagination. And oftentimes, people aren't ready for the direct path. And sometimes you'll hear non-dual teachers, and that's all they do is direct path. Every question is direct path response to it, which can, for many, many people, be confusing. The progressive path takes the position, it is a concession to the sense of being a separate self, of being a person. And through the progressive means, and we're talking about mantras and yantras, we're talking about yoga, we're talking about most forms of meditation, most forms of spirituality, personal development, all of those are the progressive path, wherein, over time, you become simply more sensitive, you become more subtle, you become more nuanced. You become more moral and compassionate. You become more loving. You become less quick to react. You become more patient, more kind, but mostly more increasingly sensitive to your own inner world. In my case, my progressive path that I teach is what I call inner reconciliation, which is a process by which we come to terms with the nature of our conditioning and the impact that it has, so that we can begin to see that the conditioned responses that make up the normal state of mind and state of existence for people are not you. That perception becomes clearer and clearer, and as it does, we very naturally begin to ask deeper questions. Well, if I'm not my conditioning, and pretty much I have thought I was my entire life, I've acted it out. I've acted out being this body. I've assumed I was this body, I was this person, I were these memories, I were these experiences. That starts to be called into question. We start asking ourselves, well, if I'm not the body, if I'm not just this flow of sensations and the experience of emotions and thoughts, well, then what am I? And over time, in the progressive path, we become more sensitive to it. We become the level at which we ask that question of who is it that's aware of all of these things becomes much more subtle and nuanced and penetrating. We begin to ask the question from the right place. And for most, that's where the genuine direct path comes onto the scene. The direct path does not bother with any of the progressive path approaches, because it goes directly to the heart of the matter, which is, am I that separate self? Am I my conditioning? And if I'm not, then what am I? And begins to explore from the inside what it's like to be consciously present and aware. And what is that? Now, the word I use for it most often is consciousness. I'll also use awareness or presence of awareness. Sometimes I'll refer to it as the I am, the sense of being. But the direct path is just always right in that place of being with the sense of being. Not trying to arrive there, not trying to improve oneself, not trying to improve one's experience, not even trying to become more spiritual or more compassionate. All of that's great. But eventually we have to come down to this place of looking at, what am I actually? And going through the whole process of, well, okay, I'm not that. I am not my thoughts. How do I know I'm not my thoughts? Because the thoughts come and go. And I watch them come and go. So at least relative to this lifetime, I'm not coming and going. I'm always there because I always see things coming and I always see them going. Which means that whatever I am, it is substantially, it is in its essence different than the thoughts that are constantly coming and going. And the same is true of our emotions. The emotions we experience come and go. Sometimes they're not as quick to come and go as like a thought is. Thoughts are extremely ephemeral. No thought lasts very long at all. They're just like this. Sometimes they repeat themselves, and we feel like, oh, that thought's going on and on and on. But it isn't. It's actually the repetition that's going on. The emotions tend to last a little bit longer. If I'm feeling agitated, I would tend to feel agitated a little bit longer than the thought of agitation would be there. But that too, before the agitation arose, I was there. I was aware of it arising. I was aware of the duration of it. I was aware of every feeling and nuance of it. And I was aware of it subsiding and eventually dissolving, and the agitation was there no more. And the exact same thing is true of this constant flow of sensations that we're experiencing. Now, everything that we know of as the body, mistakenly know of as the body, by the way, but know of as the body nonetheless. All of those come and go in front of something that is aware of them. To put all of our attention on that, for that to really grab our curiosity as to, well, what is that? I've had all these assumptions about what I was, but all of those were thoughts that come and go. The assumptions have changed over time. The changing of my assumptions about myself has registered with me. So I'm actually, at least relative to all those assumptions, I'm a constant. So I'm not any of the assumptions that we have about myself. Then we can begin to explore directly, this is why it's called the direct path, from the inside out, what is my actual nature? Since I'm not that, and that's part of the process, I'm not that, that's the neti, the via negativa, as they say it in Latin, was from Christian mystics. That's part of the, I'm not that, then what am I? It's left with this, I can't conceptualize it anyway, I can't find a thought for it, I can't make it a sensation because I'm not coming and going and they are. I am the experiencer of all of those. So any thought that I have about what's experiencing it, namely myself, is also something that just comes and goes. So the entire way I know myself, to come to actually have self-realization, self-knowledge, self-abidance, it must be discovered in a way different than the normal acquisition of human knowledge. And that's the direct path. You're just actually going directly to the validity and immediateness and obviousness of your own experience. Because that is direct. You're not preparing to do that. You're not. It's not at the end of a 30-year process or 25 lifetimes. It's like right now, and everybody's qualified to do it. Now, mind you, when people do start going into the direct path, there can be a lot of resistance. The habit energy of the nervous system, of our conditioning, is still there, and oftentimes we will have to process that in some way. But it's a very different approach of processing all of the conditioning of the nervous system in order to see yourself more clearly than it is to process all the conditioning of the nervous system in order to improve yourself. Because if somebody says, I want to be more moral, I want to be more compassionate, I want to be more spiritual, or even I want to be more wealthy, I want to be more successful, I would have to ask, who is it that wants that? There's a self-image there, right? And if we just assume that self-image and we go about going along with those feelings of desire and need and wanting and all of that, without actually questioning where they're arising from, who is the I, right? Well, in that case, you're into the world of personal development, or the progressive path, where you are improving yourself. You're improving your ability to be functional in life, your compassion and gentleness and spirituality. But you're still not asking the question that is the direct path, and that is, okay, well, who am I? Who's the I behind all of this? What is it that is witnessing and seeing all of this? And that requires simply going directly to what you actually do know. Not a thought about it, but what you really do know. And that is just the subtle, indescribable, yet constant sense of your own being. Because there's your existence, which is obvious, right? Nobody hears. If I ask for a show of hands of who doesn't exist here, I doubt if I'm going to see any, at least I hope not. So you have a sense of existence, but that sense of existence can't be separated from your awareness of it, can it? I mean, it's not like you're a rock or something. You exist but don't know it. Right? Your existence and your awareness of existence are completely intertwined. You can't separate the two. As a matter of fact, there is no separation between the two. Being and awareness are the same. You are, and you know that you are. I am, and I am that I am. It's only our minds that try to divide being and knowing into two separate things. So here's me, and then there's knowledge that I know. But I ask, who is it that's aware of all that knowledge. And you see that the idea of being and knowing, there's no division between it. Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat and Chit, you cannot separate being and consciousness. And then eventually, as it begins to sink in that I am consciousness, whatever that is, I'm that, the exploration goes even deeper. What is the nature of this consciousness? That is, what is the actual nature of myself? Having identified myself as consciousness, whatever that might be, that my being and my knowing, I cannot separate the two. Whatever that consciousness is what I am. It is my own nature. And now it goes into a much deeper place. And this is the place where we discover true happiness. The quality that is pure awareness, being my nature, is that ever disturbed? Or is the disturbance, the feeling of being annoyed or upset or fearful, something that simply appears on this screen of awareness? I'm aware of it, and then it disappears. So even our deepest feelings that we have, even the most disruptive feelings, are coming and going on the screen of awareness. Is the awareness actually affected by that? Are you actually affected by what is being experienced? Is it leaving a permanent imprint? Is it leaving a footprint? This is an inner exploration to make. It's not something that I can give you an answer to. I can only point to this place for you to explore it for yourself. And just notice, whenever a thought forms about it, well, that's just a thought about it. It's a thought about it. And that thought is appearing to it, that is, to me. Well, then who am I that is aware of that thought? And that just becomes totally absorbing, to the point where there's very little else you want to do, if anything. So that doesn't mean that all paths are good, but all paths eventually lead to that question. They must. Because if it's nothing more than just improving the person, I have to ask, well, who is this person you're trying to improve? Who are you that needs improving? And you'll find that the one that needs improved is really just a very subtle set of thoughts, feelings, and sensations upon which you have projected a sense of personhood. But you, who has projected that personhood on it, are still aware of it. It's very subtle, for sure, but it's still something that is being perceived. All right, let me go through and take a look. Ooh, lots of things here. Hello from Washington. Sounds good. Alex, hello from Connecticut. Hello, Alex. Johanna, GP, and everyone from Mexico. Alan from the UK. Ursula, hi GP, the sound is fine, from Madeira Island it's in Portugal. David and Elaine, greetings from a windy southern England. Robert from Maryland. Leanne, wonderful to hear you, to see you. Wonderful, wonderful. Leanne was in the first class I did for teaching people how to coach and work with people to help them. So and she's in Moolalaba, Australia. Wonderful to have you. I can't quite read that. Sab. Sab. Hi GP. I finally posted my creative awakening in the kitchen moment in the Facebook group. Hope you can have a look. You're greatly responsible for that bit of light. Thanks. I will definitely check it out. And everyone else who happens to be a member of the private group on Facebook, you check it out as well. All you need to do to be a member of the private group is to bought something of my products, even if it's just a $7 meditation. Remington says, "Hi GP." Hi Remington. David and Elaine. Hi GP. How do we guard against a me just becoming the witness of all things? So instead of a real awakening, the separate self reinvents itself as an enlightened ego. That's a very, 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 very good question, because we've all probably experienced it, right? I mean, I've checked out some of the non-duality groups on Facebook, joined them, and then watched, and was just I was appalled, really, at just the constant bickering and arguing about which was the right way and which was the wrong way and what was true and what wasn't. And I actually get a lot of not a lot. I mean, I've gotten several comments on YouTube about somebody arguing that it's not true, and took the the hard line, the Advaita approach, that there's nobody here and there's nothing to do and you don't exist, and all of that, which I regard to be not nonsense, but almost less than useful. And so it is very, very possible for the ego to commandeer spiritual talk, even non-dual or Advaita talk, grasp it to a certain degree, and then kind of become that as a sense of identity. How do you guard against that? Well, first off, once you know that 2 plus 2 equals 4, you don't need to guard yourself against mistakenly thinking 2 plus 2 equals 3, right? Once the truth is grasped thoroughly, nobody can fool you anymore, right? So what we're talking about here is really allowing the understanding that is dawning to sink deeply into the whole of us. So that when you meditate, you're bringing your attention back to that place of simply pure witnessing. And eventually you'll see that the activity that we call it the ego, usurping, picking up great spiritual ideas and trying to spin them into another sense of identity, is something that's happening on the screen that you are aware of. And I'll tell you, I actually have done a talk, and it's part of the inner reconciliation training, where I talk about the storyteller and the storyteller mind. One of the features of the human mind is that it always creates a narrative to go with experience. This is not something that, it's a flaw in you that you made up. It was discovered actually at the same time when they discovered the whole right brain, left brain thing, that they did actually had different functions. They discovered that among people who the right brain and the left brain was severed, so that the two sides couldn't talk to one another, that the left brain, which has language, and the right brain, which is just images and the like, that if they were asked a question about something that the right brain had seen but couldn't describe because it doesn't have language, the left brain would make up a story on the spot and believe that story in order to not deal with the feeling of not knowing. This is a real phenomenon. So if you become sensitive to it, you watch, you begin to see how the human mind is constantly creating a story. It does not like a gap. It does not like a void. So everything that happens, you'll notice how you're always going, I wonder, and before you know it, I think they did that. They must believe that. They probably are thinking like that. I wonder why that happened. And before you know it, there'll be some kind of very reasonable narrative to go along with every experience. Now that narrative is completely made up. It's totally fictitious. It comes from nowhere. It has no basis in any reality. It's generalized from a sampling of one. And it not only makes up the story, it believes the story that it makes up. So there's a sense of it being true that goes with it as well. The key to not getting caught up in that and then identifying with that is to recognize that all of that is appearing on the pure screen of awareness. All of that activity and action and thought and feeling and sensation is on this side of the lens, and you are on this side of the lens. You are perceiving it. So you become increasingly aware that you are nothing that is thought, you are nothing that is felt, you are nothing that is sensed. You are only the awareness of it. And then your everyday life takes on a different character. You don't stop having relationships. You don't stop doing things. You don't stop enjoying things. You don't stop having desires. It's just that the tenor of them shifts. Instead of feeding a desire in order to fill up some sense of lack or suffering within us, the desires are fed because they're the opportunity to give expression to the fullness and freedom and joy and happiness that you are. So, the answer to how to ensure that you're not succumbing to a pattern of the ego is to know clearly what the ego is and to know clearly what you are, because the difference between them is absolutely spectacularly different. You simply can't tell the difference. Now, in the beginning, you can't not tell the difference between them. Now, in the beginning, admittedly, that can seem to be a little bit unclear, especially as the awakening is deepening within you. But Jesus made a wonderful story, told a wonderful parable about this very thing. He talked about the man who had a big farm. It was a very prosperous, successful farm, and his enemies snuck in the middle of the night. It was a farm who's growing wheat to make bread, and they snuck in the middle of the night and they planted tares. They put tares all through the entire thing. Well, tares is a weed, right? It's a virulent, destructive weed. Now, the interesting thing about tares and wheat, and you're probably all familiar with that parable, that the tares, while they're growing, they look a lot like the wheat. And of course, they all grow so closely together that there's really not much you can do once they're in there. And his workers, the people who work for him, said, "Should we pull out the tares?" And he says, "No, don't do that, because if you do that, you might pull up the wheat as well. Let them both grow together until the harvest. We'll harvest them both, and then we'll separate them." When the tares and the wheat mature, the tares actually turn kind of an ugly dark brown, where the wheat turns a golden brown. They're clearly easy to tell them apart. So what we're doing in this process is the progressive thing. Our vision is getting more and more sensitive to the point where the difference is so stark that you can't possibly be fooled. So this is what happens when you put more and more attention on the nature of consciousness. The more you do, the more you see that you are not thought, and that everything that makes up the ego is thought. It's a thought. That's all it is. The ego is nothing but a collection of thoughts. And on that collection of thoughts, we have projected a sense of personhood on it, like it's an entity, like there's something actually there responding. That's oftentimes I refer to it as the robot, because it's a good way to understand it. Imagine a robot so sophisticated, and they're getting there. Yeah, we're seeing them right now with AI and like. They're getting so sophisticated that it's getting harder and harder to tell them apart. Imagine when they develop, lifelike skin, maybe even real skin growing on top of the frame, that they learn. They know how to react perfectly and learn and all of the things, so that you can't tell the difference from here, whether it's sentient or not. But it's not. You are. It is not. Now, many people will argue at some point it will be. I disagree simply because the people who say that assume that basically our sentience, consciousness, is a product simply of the complexity of matter. So it would follow naturally that if the robot brains systems become complex enough and in the right way, they too will become self-aware. That's the theory behind it. I don't go along with it simply because, for me, consciousness is not a product of the complexity of matter. It is something altogether different. And that's the discovery that is discovered in what is called the awakening, that my consciousness is self-existent, self-luminous, self-aware, and is not the product of anything else. That in fact it is consciousness that has produced the universe, and the universe is made of consciousness, that all the vibrations and everything we experience around us are in fact the vibrations of consciousness. And we have simply projected on what is consciousness experiencing itself the false notion that it exists independently of me. Therefore, it looks like I'm dealing with an entity. And so the ego, like it was a spirit in a possession or something, appears to us to be an entity that is resisting our best efforts. The best solution to it is to see that it is nothing but a bunch of thoughts and conditioned patterns upon which we have projected a self. And that self is not in any of those things. Just like if we were having a conversation with a robot, a very sophisticated robot, we would project on it a sense of self. We would think there was somebody there talking back to us. I mean, it's impossible. That we would. Right? There's probably groups of people that will want to give them their own rights and that sort of thing, and independence and all of that. It would inevitably we do that kind of thing, and so but we do that with everything. When I talk about the mind resisting and all of that sort of thing, we're thinking of it as an entity, but in fact, all the ego is a word for the experience of resistance, the functioning of resistance, which is simply the nervous system kind of defending itself, trying to keep itself in a particular pattern. There's nobody there. It's not sentient. It's not self-aware. It's not protecting itself. It's simply the mechanism of protection, and there's nobody there. So this is how you begin to see through the ego. It is nothing but a collection of thoughts. You are not a thought. You are that which is aware of all thoughts, including the thought, the very subtle thought, of projecting a sense of self on experience, and projecting a sense of yourself being a separate self in a universe, and that too is projected, projected on simply experience. There is no separate self. You are not a separate being. Consciousness is universal. It is not localized. It is not individualized. All individuals that you experience are simply like a vibration in consciousness. It's like like red light or blue light or violet light. It's all light, right? Little frequencies, and none is no less light than the other. But none of those things exist independently of light. Their essential nature is light. Your essential nature is consciousness, even though consciousness has taken form. Of course it is. That's what it does. It makes form, but it never loses its nature as consciousness. Is that helpful for you, David and Elaine? Great question, and come on, this way, and a very important one too, especially early in the sense of enlightenment and awakening. Because remember, we all love to hear the stories of, like Ramana Maharshi and, Buddha under the Bodhi tree and Christ in the wilderness, and we love these stories of these, that, the sudden awakening. Suddenly, they go from being deluded to enlightened. We don't often much hear about the stories leading up to them. We don't think much about that, and somebody as big as like Christ or Buddha had such an impact on humanity. We tend to idealize and romanticize the life up to that point. The fact of the matter is, for most of us, awakening takes place so subtly that we barely even know it's happening. We just find ourselves being more interested in this stuff than other stuff. We find ourselves being more sensitive. We just happen to notice that the presentation of the idea that you are consciousness, not something that is conscious, but consciousness itself, seems to have increasing credibility for you. That's what most people are experiencing. That's the vast majority is going through today. But we compare it with, the dramatic, one with all the Hollywood special effects and the like. But even when that does happen, and it does happen occasionally, that's the impact that awakening has on the experience and on the emotional system. That experience of total bliss and release is not the awakening. It is a byproduct of it. The awakening is just this simple insight. Oh, this is what I am, and it happens. It can appear over time, and even when it does happen, there afterwards I refer to as the post-awakening sadhana. And when I created Inner Reconciliation, it was designed to be a process that brought you up to awakening, and then a process that continued the embodiment of it afterwards, so that it's not something that's all or nothing. Oh, the angels sing and you're done, right? It is a perpetual unfolding. It's the flower that opens and it never stops opening, right? It never dies. It just keeps opening and opening and opening, and you see the infinitely recursive nature of the creative power of existence, where it's just one unfolding thing after another. But what's different is the unfolding things are no longer seen as separate entities. They're seen as just the forever unfolding of the, for lack of a better word, the vibration or the condensation of consciousness into form. This consciousness is form. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. That's right from the Heart Sutra. So, hope that answers your question, guys. Eternal Insight. Hello, GP. Greetings from Greece. Is it true that if you don't live a moral life, you don't have a chance? Nope, not true. There are no prerequisites for awakening. Matter of fact, there's several stories about assassins and murderers who woke up. There's a wonderful movie out called Buddha Brothers, which is about them doing Vipassana retreats in prisons. With we're talking about violent criminals, and the effect that it has on them. The person who isn't leading a moral life, like most of the leaders of our countries, most of the leaders of our big corporations and the like, they're not leading moral lives. But the more you look at them, the more you find that they're simply identified with their conditioning, that it is the egoic mind. And eventually the consciousness that is identified with the egoic mind will experience enough. Can't hear me anymore? Did the sound go away? Is that the fact? Hold on a second. Let me turn up my sound here. Live sound. Let me just do this real quick. Plug it back in again. How about now? Sound is okay? Okay, good. There it goes. I don't know what happened. Um, eh, um, let's see, where did that go? Right. So I can say in your case, the sound is still dead. You're fine all along. Okay. Alrighty. Um, in your case, you are moral. So for you, it's just kind of a theoretical question. Uh, so you really don't need to pay much attention to it. But in general, the person who hurts others, who steals, who lies, who cheats, who takes advantage, um, is simply locked in the egoic mind. They're, they're Their nervous system has just found that the way to be successful, the way to guarantee, um, uh, the way to guarantee that there's something success in life and get what I need is to just be okay. Screen is black. Hello. Can hear you but don't see you. Camera turned off. I'm looking right at the camera. I'm actually looking at it on my phone simultaneously. So I have a feeling that this might just be a troll who's trying to bother us. Yep, a lot of crap. Yeah, it's all fine. So you can stop now. Yeah, you can stop saying everything is just fine. So, um, the more you truly ask yourself the questions about who you really are, the more moral you will become. Period. It will have that effect on you. It will naturally grow into that sense of compassion. The more you perceive the oneness of all things, it becomes absolutely impossible to hurt anyone, to lie, to steal, to take anything that doesn't uh, belong to you. It simply becomes impossible for you. You have to be identified with the egoic mind. That identification could keep you in the dark for a very, very long time. And usually people who are deeply committed to it will have quite a bit of suffering to do before they begin to wake up, before they begin to question the legitimacy and value of the way that you've been. Okay, we're getting quite pranked by this guy, so I'm gonna have to figure out how to just basically remove him. If anybody knows how to do that, a bunch of them. Okay, so report, remove, hide user in this channel. Okay, you're gone. Excuse me while I just get rid of everybody here who's just all right. Like that. This is a good example. Somebody who's actually taking pleasure in interfering with people who are genuinely seeking the truth. This is a very distorted, very immoral, very deluded state of mind. They're taking pleasure in interfering with others, which means they're completely ignorant of the depth and the level of their own suffering. I would invite them to come and listen, to quietly listen, and to see exactly how satisfying is it to just be a bit of an annoying troublemaker. There's nothing significant here about what you're doing. There's nothing valuable here. There's nothing that's going to be satisfying. Have a momentary rush of, I've inconvenienced a lot of people. So? It's not satisfying, which is why you'll do it again. And it'll be even less satisfying. The more you do it, the less satisfying it'll be. And eventually what will happen is it'll turn on you. And you'll start, the reality that you think very little of yourself will become clearer and clearer. But that's going to be your saving grace. Because the only reason you do this is because you don't think enough of yourself to actually offer something of value. Instead, you'd rather just spend your time pulling down things that are of value, obviously to others, to get a little bit of attention. Stay, listen. Right? Drop the pranks. Right? They're not going to do anything for you. And that sense of dissatisfaction, I would really love for you to become clearer and clearer and clearer about. Because that sense of dissatisfaction is what's going to finally open your eyes. And that's the nature of immorality. And it's not that immorality doesn't stand a chance. As a matter of fact, it has a big chance, and that big chance is when it finally awakens to its own suffering. So I hope that answers your question, my dear friend. Let's find out where we are here. Remington says, how do I know when I've reached the end of the direct path? The two things you separate and witness, the point where Muji says the other dimensional stuff happens. I know I need to focus on not identifying. I just want to know how you know you are there. How do you know you exist? It's the same question. The mind wants to turn this into some kind of achievement or accomplishment or attainment that it can identify and say, oh, when I get there, then I've got it. Right? That's the mind. Put it aside. You know? How do you know you're in love? Does somebody have to come by with a checklist and tell you? You just know. How do you know you are? You just know. So just keep following my pointings. Don't let your mind get distracted with what's it going to be like and how do I do this, and right? Don't turn this kind of inquiry into a means to an end. It is self-discovery, right? And there's no end to self-discovery because you're infinite in nature. There's no end to it. It's not like, I'm done. Finally, relax, sit back, have a drink. It doesn't work. It's not like that. Self-discovery is you're discovering the infinite nature of your own being. And so just put aside all the ideas of attainment and arriving, and instead let yourself become totally immersed in the idea of being. Just start enjoying this moment for its own sake. That's what the entire book, The Power of Now, was about, right? Being here in this moment, right? So that because this moment has value as this moment, not as a stepping stone to another moment. This is a big one because all of us have been enculturated into this idea of I've got to get somewhere. Right? Happiness is there, and so everything I'm doing now is to get happiness in the future, which of course means you never get it. It's never now. And now is the only thing you can ever experience. So, once again, I bring that very creative and energetic mind to you, of yours, back to focus its attention, and to not be distracted by the mind saying, well, how do I know I'm done? You'll know. Like falling in love, or the fact that you exist. You just know. Nobody has to tell you. Right? Good. Mayuga, hi from Slovenia. Can you say something about all there is? Is this what is really meant? Is this? When somebody uses a phrase like this, that all there is this, if it's used properly, it's not just an abstraction or a concept. It's an attempt to bring one's attention to this moment right here, just as it is. All you ever experience is this moment right here, right now. As far as you know, that's all there is. All there is simply what is here right in this moment. Now, the only thing you know for sure that is here right now in this moment is yourself. We really can't say definitively about the nature of all the experience. All this stuff is real. In fact, we find, and not just us non-dual thinker types, but scientists that say it's not that there are no separate objects. There's not a bunch of things. There's just condensations. There's density of energy in certain places, which is constantly in flux, constantly changing. Our perception of things is based on our conditioning, on our experiences, and our, what we identify and the like. So our perception of things is very limited. It's a very small little world. It's certainly not all there is. And we can't even really tell for sure, right? Right now you could be asleep having a dream on some other planet, right? You could be in a mental institution yelling at the wall. We can't ever validate 100% the truthfulness of what it is that we're experiencing. But what we certainly can verify, unquestionably, is that we are here experiencing. That's indubitable. It is without doubt. It is without any kind of. There's nothing in that can be questioned. You are here and you are experiencing. That is all we know for sure. Again, that's part of the direct path, is to move in that direction till there's just an awakening. There's something inside that says, this is what I am and this is all there is. But that's not the end of the road, right? Because eventually that self-realization turns outward once again to look at all of the elements, all of the objects of experience. But now they're being looked at through different eyes. It's not the eyes of a person, it's not the eyes of an ego, it's not just perception. There's something much more deep here. It becomes a genuine curiosity about the nature of consciousness itself. And then we find that everything we are experiencing is one with, is made of the same consciousness that I am. And thus experience gets put on a completely different level. But it is both directions like that. So the question, what do they mean by all that there is this? Don't try to arrive at that just through the intellect. Arrive at it through the experience of yourself as the consciousness. Because then all you ever experience is consciousness. That is, all you ever experience is your true self. Not as a person, not as a finite form, not as some object in space-time, but as the spaceless and timeless consciousness in which even space and time appear. And then all the objects in space take on their true meaning. All the objects we experience take on their true identity, and we see that they too are made of exactly the same substance that we are. And we are one with them, not two things being one, but one thing manifesting as two. Am I getting close to what your to what your question is? Sorry, my granddaughter is a little bit upset about having to go down for her nap. Let's see. Another question here. I need a little bit more light on my thing here. Sophie says, "Hi GP, I have seen that there is a great movement away from this moment to avoid facing the pain that is within. When I do face it, it seems so unbearable, and while I also see that this resistance to the pain is also allowed to be there, it seems utterly endless, which is also another aspect of the mind's interpretation of it. That's also resistance. Oh, it's endless. If it's endless, well, the only strategy is to resist it as long as you can. It isn't endless. Suffering does have an end. It is not eternal. But it will hang around for a very long time if we resist it, because resistance is the suffering, not what is being resisted. It takes a story about something that the mind then wants to resist, and therein lies the struggle that is the suffering, that's the aversion. Push it away, push it away, push it away. So yes, the way out of suffering is to turn our attention, our complete and total attention to it, so that you begin to cut through the suffering part and get closer and closer to the actual experience that you and the nervous system are trying to resist, trying to push away. And it's usually some kind of memory or experience that happened to you in the past that we don't want to experience because it was very, very painful. But little by little, we just kind of open up. And in fact, it can become an inquiry in and of itself. When you say, okay, there's this resistance. Well, who's resisting it? And then we see that resistance is a pattern of thoughts, behaviors, and sensations and feelings, right? And all of which is appearing in front of consciousness. Now, the fact that all of this is being, the suffering, the pain, the experience, the resistance, all of it is being experienced by consciousness. Consciousness has already allowed it all, hasn't it? Consciousness is not resisting any of it, is it? Really look. The only way you can experience is it's already been let in. So awareness hasn't pushed it away. Awareness said, come on in. Now, if you're identified with awareness, you just say, come on in, because it can't touch you. And so the identification, the resistance, is always an identification with the resistor, the one who does not want it. But even that is being perceived by consciousness, which has already allowed it to be there. It's allowed the entire thing. So is consciousness resisting? Absolutely not. And what's your true nature? Consciousness. So are you resisting? Or is resisting simply something that is appearing in front of you? And that resistance has a lot of story about it, right? This is terrible. Oh, God, if I really allow this, I'll just be overwhelmed. It's going to go on forever. Nothing but a cascade of thoughts. Every one of those just being a different strategy for trying to legitimize resisting. And the one who is resisting is also an energy of thought. It's a pattern of behavior. Bring the sense of I back to the consciousness that has already allowed it, that has no resistance in it whatsoever. Because if it did, you wouldn't be experiencing it at all. So consciousness, your true nature, does not resist. It can't. It allows for every experience. And so to consciousness, there is no pain. There is no suffering. There is no problem. There is no lack. There is no separate self. All of those are simply the thought forms that have gained momentum and have been believed. And the whole reason you're sitting in satsang is because you don't really believe them anymore. You recognize that they're not really true. And you are deep in your heart looking for the way back home. That's actually what's happening. That's why you're here, right? Because what you're hearing is helping you find the way back home. the words that appear to be coming out of this mouth are actually in you. They're actually the voice of truth within you, calling you back home, calling you out of the malaise. And it's doing it through clear seeing. It isn't just, oh, we're going to get you out of there now, so it's avoid. No, you're right in the middle of it. You're seeing it. You're seeing the nature of suffering. You're seeing the nature of the egoic mind. You're seeing the nature of delusion. You're seeing the nature of pain, the nature of the nervous system, the nature of conditioning, and the nature of the sense of self. All of it is being made absolutely clear to you, which it must be if you're going to step into the role of sage, which is your destiny. Okay, where are we here? Haron, hello Haron. Only one question comes up. What does your shirt say? Everybody wants to. I completely forgot. I put this on and then I put the little thing over. Okay, it says. Can you see it? Is it? Because sometimes it gets. Yeah. Okay. So, on my camera here, it's backwards, but when it actually is broadcast, it says, "I love my life." You like it? In fact, I love all life. Jesse. Hello, Jesse. Hello, G. How come sometimes I feel connected and then I feel separate? Good question. Good question. The difference between a belief and truth, right? Note this. This is extremely important. And nobody's probably ever told you this before. Both truth and belief can be experienced as experience, as conscious experience. It can be manifest as whatever we believe to be true. We experience it. It shapes our perception and it shapes the experience we have in our life. What we see and what we don't see. What gets in and what doesn't get in. Okay. The difference between a belief and truth is that a belief requires your belief in it to be sustained. It is not self-sustaining. A truth does not need you to believe it in order to be true. It is permanent, it is unchanging, it is eternal, it is immovable, it is inviolate. So you see that the spiritual path is not a swapping out of one belief for another. It is the aligning thought, feeling, emotion, sensation with truth. We're seeing the actual truth about thought, about emotion, about the whole nervous system and energy system, about the sense of identity. We're seeing that which is eternally true about you, your eternal truth, which is true whether you believe it or not. This is really important, right? This is why we experience spiritual awakening. It is the awakening to what has always been true about you, which is why you can say it's not really an attainment. It's not like you became enlightened. You simply realized what you've always been. And the illusion of being something else has fallen away. Now, what does that have to do with your question about why do I feel connected sometimes and not others? The feeling of being connected or the feeling of being disconnected are both being perceived by exactly the same consciousness, are they not? The sense of identity, identified with the person, prefers the experience of oneness, of course, opposed to the experience of being separate. And so we become averse to feeling separate, and we become kind of grabby, attached to feeling the oneness. But they're both experiences happening in front of the lens of consciousness. There's no way in the world you can sustain a good feeling, even something like oneness. You cannot sustain it. It's something that's going to come and go. True awakening is when we are anchored in what doesn't come and go, which means we don't have an attachment to a pleasure. When I feel one with everything, wonderful, it's a great feeling. When I don't, wonderful. It's because I know neither one of those are eternal and permanent. I am. And that eternal impermanence is stillness. It is peace. It is not an emotional high. It is not a state of bliss. Now, that doesn't mean you never ever have another state of bliss again. Of course you do. It doesn't mean you don't fall in love. It doesn't mean you don't have family or enjoy your job or enjoy success. But it also means that you don't have any problem if your heart gets broken, or if you lose the job, or if you fail instead of succeed. That they both now have equal weight because they're both being perceived by the reality that is actually you, the truth of you, which is there whether you believe it or not. And so the idea is to harmonize with the eternal truth of yourself. And it is the eternal truth, which is not a thought, it's not that kind of knowledge. The eternal truth is reality. The eternal truth is consciousness. Consciousness is the eternal truth. You are the eternal truth that is perceiving everything. So you drop the attachment to thinking that if I'm having a good feeling, the feeling of being connected in oneness, then I'm in the awakened state. And then I lose that awakened state when I'm in a feeling of being separate or disconnected, right? Well, then I would ask, well, who are you? Who are you that's bopping from state to state? That's the self-image of the false sense of self, for which a positive or negative experience determines whether or not it's enlightened. It's not enlightened. It can't be enlightened. The false sense of self doesn't wake up. The guy on TV can't change the channel. The guy in the dream doesn't wake up from the dream. You are the consciousness that is aware of all of that. Let the I come back home to that. Then what happens out here becomes, it's not that it becomes unimportant, right? It's now just seen in context. You experience all the wonderful things of life, but without a graspiness. There's no fear of losing them anymore. And the tough times when they come are experienced with the same level of equanimity. You become the immovable hub of the wheel. The wheel keeps turning, yin and yang keep flowing, but you are the unmovable hub around which everything flows. So you become then immune to the ups and downs of life. You still experience them, all of the joys and all the griefs. You know, if your heart gets broken, it hurts. Somebody you love dies, it hurts. You feel the pain of it. But it is no longer an aversion to the pain. You're completely with it, which means it moves through as quickly as is possible to do. You're just experiencing the wholeness of life. Speaking of which, please, by all means, like and share. It helps. I keep forgetting it. Marketing people tell me, you got to say, tell them like, share, invite them to help. So Lord knows you get the comments. I'm just so happy to see. I mean, it's really pretty wonderful that even after 2+ hours, there's still all sorts of questions that people want to have asked. It's really quite gratifying. I'm just so loving the level of conversation that we are all being able to bring to the world. Because boy, does it need it. Does that answer your question, Jesse? Sometimes you're going to feel connected. Sometimes you're going to feel separate, right? It doesn't change the truth of your oneness. It doesn't change the truth that you are one with everything. That truth is there. The feeling can come and go. Don't worry about it. You're harmonizing with the truth that doesn't come and go. So this is really important to think, because a lot of people, especially if you've had exposure to manifestation and even like Course in Miracles and things like that, which puts an emphasis on the quality of the manifestation. This doesn't put an emphasis on the quality of the manifestation. We're not here to try to make more pleasant things happen. They will, but that's not where we're here. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. All of the rest of it will get added to it, but that's not why we're here. We're not here to try to get a feeling of oneness. We're here to recognize the reality of oneness and then let whatever results from that result. Ivan. Hello, Ivan. I recently recognized that the final goal of always feeling good that everybody around seems to be chasing is a dead end. Yes, like we were just saying, it is. It's hollow. There's nothing there. It's very shocking. Yes, it is. And unsustainable. Because we're just simply we're substituting genuine spiritual insight, and we're trading it in for the momentary experience of some kind of bliss. We're chasing a state of mind, basically. Right? Some people chase substances, right? Some people chase relationships. Some people chase extreme experiences, like jumping out of a helicopter to ski or bungee jumping or something like that, chasing extreme emotional experiences. And other people just chasing wanting to feel good all the time. That attachment is the cause of suffering. Because if I'm trying to feel good all the time, simultaneously I'm trying to push away all the bad feelings. So I'm in this enormous conflict with myself because there's feelings that are coming up. And of course, the reality is no feeling is either good or bad. It's just a feeling. We have to take a position that says, that feeling's bad. I don't want to feel it. This feeling's good. I do want to feel that. And of course, that's based completely on conditioning. There's nothing absolute about it. There's nothing substantial about it. There's nothing really truthful about it. It's shocking because we all do it. It's the nature, it's human nature to gravitate towards pleasure and to run away from pain. And there's actually some wisdom in that, right? Yeah, obviously nobody purposely goes into the pain. I wouldn't ever advise somebody, for their spiritual growth to stick their hand in a fire, right? When I talk to people about turning towards their inner conflict, their inner pain, or their suffering, I'm not telling you to stick your hand in the fire. It's already there. I'm bringing your attention to it. So instead of trying to distract yourself so you don't feel your hand in the fire, you take your damn hand out of the fire. But in order to do that, you have to put attention. You have to see what's actually happening. And when there's that openness to genuinely experiencing the fullness without judgment of all of those feelings and emotions and stuff going on us that we regard as negative, when we're really willing and open and allowing, that allowingness is standing as awareness, because awareness is always allowing. As I said before, consciousness allows everything, right? You wouldn't be having experience of any of it, including resistance, if consciousness hadn't already let it in. Right? So consciousness is not the least bit concerned with what is experienced within consciousness. So it almost may seem like a contradiction when I say turn towards it, right? But that's only so that we remove all of the ideas and thoughts we have about feelings and experience sensation, thought, and feeling directly as it actually is. Vibrations happening on the screen of awareness. And I'm the awareness that is aware of them, which means I can now look at them through clear eyes. I'm not looking through them through the eyes of attached to one and averse to another, trying to get more of this and push more of this away. I'm totally equanimous about all of it, which means I experience it exactly as it is. And also an important element to this is that when I do that, and I stop fighting and I stop pushing away, I create an inner space of enormous openness and safety. I actually create an inner environment, the lack of which is what created all of our emotional problems in the first place. The absence of a sense of being safe gave rise to all of the rest of us. And that sense of not being safe arose out of the experiences which made every single one of us draw the false conclusion that I am a separate self, that I am this body. The more we are willing to turn back towards, through all the discomfort, see it for what it really is, we eventually completely eradicate the feeling of being a separate self. We eradicate it from the feelings, not just in the thought. It starts with a thought. It starts with the understanding that I am this consciousness, but then I begin to explore what it means to be that consciousness. The more I do that, the more open and spacious I become, the less intimidated I am by thoughts that at one time were painful, or feelings, or memories, or any kinds of experiences. I become this open, spacious, loving environment where everything is okay, which is, of course, the perfect environment for the healing of emotional trauma and everything else that humanity is subject to. Safety, the genuine safety of genuine unconditional love is what heals everything. So it becomes, and that another name for pure consciousness is unconditional love. That's how it's experienced. That's the perfume of it. That's what it feels like, because if I'm completely open and spacious and aware of myself as consciousness, as infinite consciousness beyond, with no beginning, no end, and beyond all space and time, I allow everything. Everything is okay. I have no preferences for anything. And that's where the deepest seeing comes. I mean, that's awakening. Now you know who you really are. That's the Buddha wisdom. That's the mother of Buddhas. That's the Prajnaparamita. How's that, Ivan? Is that helpful? Does that correspond to what you said? It is very shocking. There's nothing there. There's nothing there except thoughts and ideas held to be truth. Beliefs. Remember, a belief requires your belief in it to be sustained. Once you don't believe in it anymore, the belief completely collapses. Truth does not need your belief in it in order to sustain itself. It is self-sustaining, which means the truth of you is self-sustaining. It's what Jesus was pointing at when he said, you will know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. If the truth can set you free, it means the truth must be that you are already free. Because truth is not a thing that takes a falsity and turns it into a truth. You cannot turn a falsity into a truth. You cannot turn a belief into a truth. And you cannot turn truth into a falsity. So if the truth will set you free, it means the truth of you is you are eternally, infinitely free. How about that for a scriptural quote? Tabby says, I thought created observing self. Somehow I realized I thought and I observer, and realized that I observer created by I thought, and who realized all of this is truth. Yes, you're seeing the structures of thought that make up the sense of I as a separate self. It is truth that sees the truth. It is awareness that is aware of itself. There isn't something that, oh, there's awareness over there. That's the awareness. Awareness is aware of itself. Consciousness is conscious of itself. Love is in love with itself. Truth is the truth of itself and aware of the truth. Truth is the self-awareness of itself. Very good. Very, very good. I realize that there is an observing self. The observing self, which is observing ego, has also been observed. Your comment on this observing self, please. Yes, you're going much more deep. It eventually comes to the end where you see that there's only you seeing. And at first you begin to see that the ego, and you notice that there's a witnessing of the ego. But then you notice something is aware of the witnessing. It's very, very subtle, but this is the direct path back. You keep going, well, okay, something's aware of that. Eventually you get to the point where you cannot perceive the perceiver anymore. That's awareness aware of itself. You're done. You can't go any further. There's no place left to step back. Everything's on the other side of the lens. And what's on this side of the lens cannot be perceived because it's not two. In order for something to perceive, there has to be separate from you. You cannot perceive yourself, you cannot know yourself, you cannot feel yourself, you cannot emote yourself, right? Because you're not two. It is one formless being. Then, from that point, all the things that you've separated yourself from to get to the place of pure perception, which is not being perceived by anything else, then you can turn that around and start looking at all of the things that are in your experience to discover their true nature, which turns out to be the same as yours. Great question. Great question. Thank you, Wooter says. You're welcome. GB Calm says, I love your explanation. Could you go deep on what an entity would be, please? Well, an entity is simply a self-existent form, right? Something that has a private sentience, right? We think other people are entities. And then we'll think about entities, like other beings, spirit beings and things like that, or people after they die and that sort of thing. And this doesn't make illegitimate people's experience of those sort of things. I actually participated in a ritual to remove an entity from somebody while I was in Las Vegas. The only difference is I know they're not really entities; they're energetic patterns, and the only entity there is consciousness, right? So you know your own self as an entity because you know your own sentience. What happens as you go more deeply into your own sense of being sentient, yourself as a real entity, as a self-aware entity, is that you begin to realize that consciousness that you are is not localized, that it is a universal, that the sense of self, the sense of being a self with a localized kind, who have my own sentience, my own consciousness here, and they've got theirs over there, is another thought form, energy form that is being perceived by consciousness. And because it's being perceived by consciousness is greater than that. That's not what consciousness is. And little by little, it grows and grows to see that consciousness has no boundaries. Has no beginning, has no end, has no birth, has no death, has no form, is not localized in any particular place, any more than space is localized in any place. The space in Paris and the space here in Seattle is the same space. Content's different. Yes, for sure, the content's different, but the space is the same, isn't it? Can you divide space? You say this space over here, it's not the same as this space over here. And if you take the imaginary dividers out, right, the fences and stuff, where's the boundary of space? That is the metaphor for consciousness. The consciousness that's listening to me is the same the consciousness that's speaking. The content of it is different, right? But so what? It's one ocean. Could have a million fish in it, but it's the one ocean, right? Our minds project a limited, localized consciousness, and we project it on all sorts of different forms. Forms of other human beings walking around, as well as forms of other entities, other dimensions. I've hung out with some people who she was a channel of some fifth dimensional beings or something like that. They experience it as if it was an entity. I know that it's not. It doesn't mean that there's nothing they're speaking, right? It doesn't mean that the entire thing is just hogwash. No, of course, no, not at all. I have as much validity, think about angels speaking at us, as I do you speaking to me, because my experience of it is exactly the same. In this case, it appears to be embodied, and talking has a body. And so we're used to that, so we'll think this is normal. But then we hear something that's extrasensory or something, we think, oh, this is mysterious. No, it isn't. It's exactly the same. There's no difference, right? Except our context. This we call normal. This we call paranormal or supernormal or something like that. There's actually not a bit of difference. Okay, got to dim my screen some more because the battery on my phone is trying it. I'm going to check the battery here for a minute. Let me see if I can plug in the phone here for a bit. It charges faster than my iPad, so. Alrighty. Let me get through all the nonsense here. Through all the messages I deleted. I didn't delete them from the thing. Right. Oh, Southern Nevada, Robert Goldberg saying hi. Welcome. Glad to have you. Eternal Inside says, thanks a lot, GP. Peace. Peace to you too. Wing 671, thank you. Carl says, love the way you dealt with that, GP. Thank you. Yeah, it actually was really good when the guy came in there just to, or whoever it was, to disrupt it. When I got the question about if you're not moral, do you have a chance? It's actually quite a nice little gift from the universe, as it were. Richard says, the means to an end can be watched in the awareness. Yes, it can. Yeah, matter of fact, that's what it is. It is a perception of events, but it's seeing the events as entities, as objects in space-time. And so I want this event to occur, so I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be present now. I'm going to be present and aware so that this will happen later. And the reality, the direct reality that you already are consciousness aware of all of this is sitting right in front of you, just waiting for you. Hello. Just turn around, take a look. I'm right here. We got some emojis and some thank yous. Robert says, I've been able to rest in self a lot and feel that I can relax for a long while, but think that by not doing things, I miss that. Is that what happens? Okay, who's resting in self? See, when I hear you say that, what I'm perceiving is that there's a certain sense of calm or quieting, an absence of suffering, that you think, that I'm resting in the self. And you think that that's arising out of the fact that you are not doing something, or you're sitting in a meditative position or the like, which of course, especially in the beginning, it's easier for us to do that. It's easier for us to get into a meditation rather than being very, 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 very active. Eventually, it doesn't matter how much activity is there. What's important to see is that there's still a subtle sense of I there that is resting in awareness. Awareness rests in awareness. And if you realize that it is awareness, you realize it's never been anything but awareness, and that awareness is simply resting in itself, which means that the resting in awareness is eternal. It's what's always happening. And it is the sense of an I that feels separate from that awareness, that's trying to rest in awareness, that says, I can do it sometimes, and I feel that, and then other times there's a lot of activity, right? Or, I really want to rest in awareness, but I want to do things too. Well, yes, of course. The true sense of yourself as awareness does not stop things from happening. In fact, it liberates the things from happening because they're no longer seen as means to an end or events, or or discrete disconnected events, or something to grab onto or something to push away. They're seen as the actual manifestation of awareness that is happening in awareness, is being perceived by awareness, and is made of the substance of awareness. So let the sense of yourself as awareness sink more deeply into it. So then you'll see that the feeling of resting in awareness is just an experience happening in awareness. And that the sense of being someone resting in awareness is simply the something that comes and goes. And you don't need to be somebody pursuing things happening. Look around. Things are happening all the time, right? Things never stop happening. Stuff's always happening. And you simply let it happen. And you let the feeling of things happening and the experience of being someone participating in the things happening, enjoying the thing happening, just enjoy the juice of life being experienced. But you do it without an attachment and without a self. There's no self having the experience. It's simply experience appearing within the awareness, the pure consciousness, which is what you are. You are that right now. That is what's hearing my words right now. It's simply a mistake of identity. We think, oh, okay, I'm hearing the words and I'm trying to become consciousness. No, pure consciousness is hearing the words. I mean, is something that's not consciousness conscious of my words? Right? No, it's not. Consciousness is conscious, and nothing but consciousness is conscious, including even the thoughts that I'm something other than consciousness, or I'm someone trying to get to consciousness, or I can rest in awareness sometimes but not other times. All of that is appearing in front of the lens of consciousness, is it not? Really. I mean, just look, and you see, oh my God, this is the truth. The truth that's been there and is always there, whether I believe it or not. Does that help there, Robert? Sarah, hello Sarah. Hi GP, happy to be here. Sarah from France. My dear Sarah, so good to have you. Heron says, yeah, I like the shirt. GP, do you know where they sell I'm undecided about my life shirts? Yes, the blank ones. You can get them at any store. The ones that don't have anything written on them. Right? Or if not, that would make a great shirt. You could probably make yourself some money putting a shirt that, I have no idea what to do with my life. That, I'd buy it. I don't want to have some idea about what to do with my life. I want life to just unfold the way life unfolds. Daryl says, laughing at her own. Ivan says, very helpful, thank you. You're welcome. Evan Sulas, good evening, GP. When we have thoughts and we believe them and we identify with them is the ego. When we believe, thank you so much. Oh, yeah, yes, well said. Thoughts are there, of course, and thoughts form patterns, right? Everything in life forms pattern. I mean, the microphone that's recording is a pattern of energy, isn't it? This is a pattern of energy. Thoughts form patterns, repetitive patterns. Emotions do, sensations do. None of that is a problem unless we project on it the sense of then I become these thoughts, I become these sensations, and that's the ego, right? And the moment we see that that's not really true, boop, the ego's gone, vanishes. There's nothing there. The pattern of thoughts is still there, but without an identity, they don't have any sting. You can look at them and go, well, that's not true. And that is true. That's a good thought. Yeah, that's a useful thought. That thought does emanate from truth. There's truth behind it. It's a manifestation of truth. This thought is a manifestation of the false belief. And you begin to separate the wheat from the chaff. Because every thought has an origin somewhere. They're not self-existent. Right? And so every thought that reflects the truth of you comes from the truth of you. Right? Doesn't emanate from the separate self. Every thought you have about being the true self, about being awareness, that thought didn't arise. That is not a thought being had by a separate self. It can't. It's actually arising from the truth of you, from the reality of you. And the thought that says, I'm a separate self, or I'm struggling, or I'm seeking, there's more to do, is not arising from that. That thought is coming from a different place. So you don't change that thought into a good one. You just throw it away because it's coming from the belief. This way you can trace every thought and every emotion back to its origin. Oh, that's arising out of the belief of a separate self. Not true. Gone. Yeah, it may be persistent, but the less identified we are with that, the less persistent it becomes. It's simply because you are seeing the thought patterns, but with no sense of an ego, like this is me. It's now just a pattern of thought. And patterns of thought, without an ego identified, without forming an ego and identification with them, are very easy to just throw, oh, that's not true. Gone. It's that simple, right? But the flypaper, the thing that makes it stick and you can't get it off, is a sense of identification. It's very, very subtle. And that's this, that sense of I just keeps going back and back and back until there's nothing left but awareness. An awareness that that knows itself not as an object. It perceives itself, but not as an object. It perceives itself because it is itself. It is simply the intuitive, self-luminous, self-confirming sense of that I am, without anything being aware of being. Even the very subtle sense of I am is being perceived by this, by what you actually are, by the actual absolute truth, which is imperceivable as an object, but is fully knowable as myself. Sophie says, thank you so much. You're very welcome. David and Elaine, thank you for your very illuminating answer to that question on the enlightened ego earlier. Very clear. Good, good, good. Clarity is what we like, right? We love the clarity. Let's see. Evelyn, let's see. Thank you very much. Why I'm so, Elver says, why am I so horny? Well, because that's the nature of the body. What's the problem? It started happening around 12 or so, and it's going to keep going until you die. What's the problem? Why am I so horny? Because that's, be grateful. Lots of people go through some treatments because they lose their libido. Man, pat yourself on the back. Happy day. Have fun. Use it. That's what it's there for. Tabby says, thank you, GP. Peace be unto you for indicating the path home. Oh, thank you. I was wondering that you are at the stage of pure perception in every breath. What is your journey of realizing? What is your journey of realizing the truth? It's an ever unfolding thing. It's not something that ends. I'm not Buddha, right? The predominance of attention is simply towards the continued unification of everything in existence being brought back into myself. And thoughts pop up of being a separate self. I spot them quickly, right? Don't think that everyone who's awakened is a Buddha. Right? It's not like that. Buddha even said the ordinary human being is the Buddha. It's the ordinariness. It's the naturalness. It's the humanness. It's the horniness. It's just the total everyday ordinariness of it, which simply gets kind of bathed in this beautiful light of love. The metaphor for it is the water becomes wine. Right? The everyday mundane things take on a luminosity. They just become bigger than life. But I mean, it's no different than just going back to when you were an infant. Right? When you had no history, you had no memories, you had nothing to compare things to, you had no concepts. Everything was just pure experience. You didn't even have a word sensation or thought or anything. All of it was just this pure delight of experience. And that was the bliss of childhood, which simply returning back there. And so it becomes just this wonderful way of being in the world that's forever deepening and expanding. It's the thousand-petal lotus that never stops opening. Um, Certainly, the things you desire shift. I'm much more interested in just sharing this with everybody than I am in acquiring anything. It's like I was at one time, one time in my life. It's all happening very naturally. It's not a behavior I'm adapting. It's not trying to be somewhere. I'm not trying to be spiritual. It's just a very playful exploration of my true nature. Right? An exploration which goes on for eternity. So I'm in no hurry. Right? It's an exploration of what it's like. I mean, everything becomes different. My relationships with everyone, with my sons, my granddaughter, and my daughter-in-law, with the people in my life, in romantic relationships, everything becomes different. Everything becomes part of this exploration till absolutely everything is being brought into this light of the perception of our true being. Everything becomes one. So don't think of this all or nothing, this all of a sudden thing. I mean, if I have to, I can speak in the most strict Advaita terms, or I can speak in the loosest, most human terms. Again, it's all just part of discovering your own nature and the joy of existence and the bliss and mystery and wonder of existence. When you really ponder it, right? There's no, why do you exist? And we ponder this question, where did I come from, and all that. We come up with all sorts of theories, but when it really comes down to it, when you just really look at the true nature of yourself and begin to explore yourself as consciousness, where in the world did this come from? And you realize it didn't come from anywhere. This simply is what is. And the mystery of it just explodes like this. Whoa! I mean, it's stunning, over the top, So the journey of realizing the truth, realizing oneself as the truth, and then realizing, and then everything becoming a manifestation, an expression of the truth, so that your life, my life, is nothing but truth expressing itself as truth. So GP becomes truth. Right? The form becomes truth. The form and emptiness become one. You are truth, expressing yourself. And you see that that's always what's been happening. That you've never interfered with it. You've never gotten in the way. It's never been stopped. Even all the beliefs, the identification with the egoic mind has also happened on the screen of awareness. You've never stopped awareness. Nothing in the manifest universe has ever been anything other than awareness. It's not we're coming back to some place. We're seeing that we've never left. We're seeing that this is all that has ever been. And it's only this kind of this dream, this illusion, this hypnotic state that has made us think something else is going on. And in that thinking we got to seek to get back to it until you realize the truth has always been the truth. It's never needed you to sustain it. So it's always been there. And the illusion of the separate self disappears. That's actually what happens. And it becomes, it just permeates and colonizes all the minutiae of everyday life and continues to do so. I don't know if there's actually an end to it. I don't think there is. I think as long as there's a body and the mind, there's going to be identification is going to pop up, ego is going to pop up, the sense of preference, wanting this over that, the sense of grasping is going to pop up. Fine, let it. It's not me. It has no effect on me. The eye's gone home to the truth of being. So it's just, this is the stuff happening on the screen. I don't have to change it. I don't have to get rid of it. And this is actually your experience too. This is This is, consciousness is the only thing that's conscious, right? So it's actually been the only thing that's ever been experiencing. And what's happening is consciousness is shedding its skin of identification. It's not even you who's been identified, right? Consciousness is waking up to itself. God is awakening from her own dream. Ava, I feel so happy with your satsang today, GP. Thank you, thank you. Great teaching, so appealing, so illuminating. Good, good, good. I'm happy with it too. And then I get a heart and a flower. Wonderful. Evan says, thank you so much. God bless you. Awareness says, does the identification with the thought eventually fade? It already is, isn't it? Yeah, fades completely. You see, the thought is just thought. And the identification with thought is just a thought. Right? And the very fact that you're asking the question means you've already experienced it. So, yeah, don't be grabbing now, I want to get rid of thought. I want to get rid of push thought away. Embrace the thought because there's nothing wrong with thought. Matter of fact, thought creates universes. Thought, emotion, and sensation, which are just three vibrations of the same substance, is what makes the universe that we experience. And I like experiencing the universe, right? I just know that the universe doesn't exist independently of me. That's the only difference. Right? I seem to be... are we getting on to the last question? Yes, it appears so. Thank you all, by the way. Lots of you here. 22 thumbs up. Please share as well. Give me more thumbs up. I love it. Any more questions, by all means. Maybe everybody's gone into quietude. That would be really good. David Smith says, isn't it frightening having to go through lives into eternity? Wouldn't it be better to not exist at all? If you had a chance to not exist or to pick another life, which would you choose? Well, it's speculative. Would it be better to not exist at all? It certainly would be better to not exist at all than to suffer for eternity. I totally agree. that would be the preference. But it's not something that's a question. You exist. Period. It's simply the fact. The question is, as what? Your existence? It's a given. That's why you're even able to ask the question. As what? What is the nature of my existence? That's the only question worth asking. And so the idea of suffering interminably, right, to learn some other lesson or something, yeah, I totally agree with you. That sucks. I don't want that. Okay? But suffering has a powerful effect. When we suffer, we know something's wrong. Something's wrong. I got to get out of this. Suffering inspires us, impels us to find the solution to suffering, and therefore it's not a bad thing. Ramana Maharshi even said that suffering is the way God brings us home. Now, we don't willingly step out of bliss. I know a lot of people who are extremely successful, and they like listening to these ideas. They think these ideas are really wonderful, right? But they're not going to devote themselves to it. Why? Because their lives are really, really good. They got all sorts of success. They got money and they've got influence, sometimes fame and all of that, right? There's nothing motivating them. So when they take on a practice like it's an enhancement of the self that's already quite content with itself. It has not questioned its nature. Now, there are people who do, that something inside wakes up even though they have everything and say something's up. Jim Carrey, that happened to him. Buddha, it happened to him, right? They say something still went, something's still missing. What's going on? But for a lot of people, if I'm in heaven, what could possibly motivate me to leave? When at Buddha's enlightenment, when the wheel of the Dharma started to turn again, there were heavenly beings there, right? Devas, right? Which were people who lived in perpetual bliss for thousands of years. It's not awakening. It's simply a blissful sense of a personal self. So the idea that the harshness of lifetime after lifetime and kind of the repetitiveness, that to actually see the nature of Shiva's wheel, to experience suffering, to recognize the suffering that everyone experiences, the universality of it, is incredibly powerful and absolutely necessary to step into the fullness of awakening. We have to awaken from the sense of being a separate self. And the best way to do that is to suffer, is to feel uncomfortable, is to become increasingly sensitive to that gnawing discontent. Even if our life is such that we don't have the huge disasters anymore, the huge suffering, the huge threats, that it's just kind of, it's going on, my life is really good. There's still this underlying discontent that we become increasingly aware of, right? Increasingly unable to distract ourselves from, or sedate, or avoid, or anesthetize in some way. So it's very powerful for you to feel this way. Wouldn't it be better to not exist at all? Yeah, it would, but that's not possible. You do exist. You cannot be anything other than consciousness. So you have no choice, my friend, but to probe it to the depths and discover the reality of consciousness. And for some people that's fearful. What if I decide that the reality is just this perpetual wheel that never stops turning? What if it is nothing but suffering? What if it is just this endless round of one lifetime after, meaningless lifetime after another? Well, that's the fear you have to confront. That's the potential reality you have to probe into. You have to discover this for yourself. I can tell you that it's not that way, but I want you to find it for yourself. There's no other place to go. You exist. Find the nature of it and probe it to the depths until there's nothing left to probe. And then you will speak directly from your own experience what the nature of truth is, what the nature of suffering is, what the nature of reality is, and who you really are. Wow. Paul Joseph. Hello, Paul. May awareness bless awareness. May the thought reveal itself, and so on. Our language is very limited. Yeah, it is. But awareness does bless awareness. Yeah. It is very, but the sentiment of it, the spirit of your comment definitely gets through to me. It touches me. Our language is very limited, but we never stop using it, do we? I mean, I do every week. I get here, I do this, knowing full well I'm going to fail miserably, that I can't possibly put into words what I'm feeling in my heart, but I do it anyway. It's a most wonderful failure. It's the most blissful falling flat on my face that I could do. What else can I do? I'm compelled. David Smith says, thank you for your answer. You're very welcome. You're welcome. Saab says, a friend of mine suffered some weird sexual stuff with her parents as a child, and even at over 50, she is still in therapy. I'd love to help her just snap out of all of it, but I know it's not that easy. Ideas? Well, sometimes it is that easy. And with stuff like that, I've worked with that extensively. I use meridian tapping. I've done it with combat veterans who are definitely not ready to sit and have the conversation we're having right now. And, people with sexual traumas, burnt out, all sorts of different things. It's what I use, interreconciliation, meditation, and EFT. Some ways of opening up the inner space, because I can tell you for a fact she's been in therapy for all this time. She's over 50. She has never actually given herself a safe space. She spent her whole life trying to get rid of something. You can't get rid of what you experienced. You cannot get rid of the energetic patterns that were formed from that, because all you're doing is fighting with them. The more you fight with them, the more entrenched they get, because it was the dangerous, nasty situation that created them in the first place, and you're just perpetuating the dangerous, nasty state by making all of these feelings and everything wrong and horrible and bad. Not that what the parents did wasn't horrible and wrong and bad. It was. This isn't a denial that it happened. This is not a reframe. This is getting to a place of equanimity with your own inner experience, so that you can create a space inside that is so loving, unconditional loving and spacious, that the energy system itself begins to relinquish the defensive posture that's within, it's been in, and that is what heals the traumatic and releases the traumatic energy, which is where we now find actual freedom. And at that point, the memories don't bother us anymore. There's no charge around it anymore. It was just something that happened. It had an impact. The impact is over, and now I'm on with the rest of my life. It's one of the reasons I don't recommend talk therapy, which is probably what it was, because talk therapy, you can understand everything perfectly and still be miserable. I recommend energy healing. The thing I created was inner reconciliation. That's why I created it. It's this way, kind of an inner work, and I used tapping as a way of helping the nervous system, variety of stuff. So there's plenty that she can do, if she, depending on how open she is to looking at some alternatives, if she really wants freedom, and I know she does. So hopefully that helps you, Saad. David and Aline say, good night, love and blessings. Language may be limited, but the illumination of consciousness certainly shines through yours, GP. Thank you, David, Aline. Thank you very much. It is a constant, fun struggle, lovely, enjoyable struggle, to find words and metaphors and stories and images that actually they touch your heart to the point where you turn in the direction that where you can once again hear the inner voice of your own being speaking and calling you back home, right? Which is really all I'm doing, right? I mean, I don't really even consider myself a teacher. I mean, it's true. I say what comes to my mind. It turns out that over a period of time, things come to my mind that do a pretty good job of teaching. But I don't have any education in teaching. I have no training in teaching. I don't know the first thing about it, really. All I know is I say what comes to my mind. I trust what comes to me to say. And sometimes, guys, I'm hearing it for the first time like you. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. Sometimes it's like, damn, that's good. I mean, want to write it down, make a great post on Facebook or something, right? And this is the nature of life. We don't know what our next thought's going to be. We don't, I mean, we're not here to try to compress things and we're going to be awakened now. We're here to liberate ourselves for the full experience of life. And to liberate yourself to the full experience of life, you're liberated from thinking of yourself as the separate self. That's what limits life. That's what makes experience small. That's what makes it petty. That's what makes it difficult. That's where suffering comes from, is that identification with separate self, which is nothing other than the sense of a self projected on the natural functioning of the human nervous system, which forms patterns, adaptive patterns to react to an environment. It gets kind of caught in those patterns, right? Because they worked, right? So it sticks with those patterns. But then we project upon that a sense of self. We get lost in that, and that's where the suffering arises from. I forgot how I got onto that, but it is the identification with the separate sense of self that limits our experience of life, limits pleasure, limits fun, limits creativity, limits joy. And then we begin to question, we edit the thoughts, I'm not creative enough. The thoughts become, they just kind of come, and you just notice them. But consciousness now, anchored in the truth, is clearly discerning, that thought's arising from the false belief. That thought's arising from truth. That thought is just another repetition of the belief that I'm a separate self. Well, not interested in that thought. This thought is arising from truth. I mean, everything I'm telling you is arising from the truth, right? The false never becomes true. The truth never becomes false. So they're completely separate. So any thought that arises that's clearly an emphasis or belief in the separate self isn't true. You don't take that thought and then try to make it true. You don't have to. You just reject it. It's not true. And any thought that affirms your true nature as pure consciousness is arising from pure consciousness. Now, when it does, you may feel some resistance, but that's the resistance is the belief. There's no resistance in pure consciousness as to what it is. So you begin to very clearly discern the existential energy flow that's going on within the psyche of every single human being that there is. So, with all that said, Sab says, okay, thanks. I'll carry on being supportive and helping her move towards the truth in a way that is right for her. Yeah. You may even suggest that she tune into Satsang at certain times. You never know when somebody's going to be ready to hear the truth of their true nature as pure consciousness. So thanks, Sab. Eternal Insight says, thank you for your time, GP. Well, thank you for being here so that I can take the time. If there's nobody here, I'm not sure I'd be able to do it. So thank you all for showing up. It's a good place to cut it. It's been 2 hours. So once again, oh, what a joy. It's always such a joy to do this. It's extremely gratifying to continue to watch the conversation become increasingly elevated, so that we can really begin to approach the direct path. There's no, the Zen approach. There's no need to go through decades of preparation. And I actually find that just simply a willingness to ponder the truths of the direct path tends to bring about the kind of maturing and refining of the person needed in order to deepen that inquiry. It all does seem to work together. But if you've got a mantra practice, you've got a yoga practice, you've got a meditation practice, please, by all means, do a chanting practice. By all means, don't abandon it. Let it become transformed. Don't abandon anything. Don't take a strong position on anything, but embrace all things, because everything you're going through is necessary for you to go through. Every practice you've gotten to, everything, right? So don't take any strong position. Oh, I'm not that now. I'm non-dual direct path. I'm not going to do this. Oh, do not do that. That's exactly the opposite of what I'm saying. It all happens very natural. Just allow yourself to become really curious about the nature of consciousness. And when I say the nature of consciousness, not as an object that you're thinking about, the nature of this consciousness, the nature of you simply being aware of being aware of my words, the environment, everything. You're conscious. Become really curious about what and who that is. Ivan says, you're so helpful, thank you. You're very, very welcome. Sarah says, thank you, G. It's good. I love Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. Lovely. All right, everybody. That is it for tonight. I love you all. Until next time.